Over 60. Revealed. 4 shocking carbs a avoid e 4 transformativas choices you must embrace. Eleanor stared at the screen in disbelief, her fingers hovering above the keyboard. The headline loomed over her like a dark cloud threatening rain. For years, she had embraced the warmth of family traditions, her kitchen a sanctuary filled with laughter and the unmistakable scent of homemade lasagna. Yet now, with each click, she felt a weight pressing down on her chest, the promise of health contradicted by the love baked into her family recipes. As she flipped through her battered recipe books on a dreary afternoon, she couldn't shake the sense of urgency building inside her. Her children, once gathered around her table, now pursued lives far removed from the comforts of their childhood home. Her youngest was chasing tech dreams in Silicon Valley, while her eldest son, Adam, prided himself on being a fitness fanatic. How had she ended up here, sandwiched between conflicting values of tradition and modern health trends? Every recipe represented familial love, the very essence of who they were. But, with her recent health issues looming large, was it enough to cling to the past? Determined to find a solution, Eleanor dove into health blogs and vibrant pajama-clad Pinterest boards, seeking inspiration for a radical transformation. "I can do this," she whispered, scanning through kale chips and quinoa salads. Each recipe brought feelings of hope, but also an unsettling sense of loss. Could she truly recreate those memories without the very ingredients that defined them? The tension coiled tightly in her stomach, a battle between her longing for heritage and the relentless pursuit of healthier choices. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Eleanor felt the tension escalate as she prepared for the family dinner. The table was laden with her reimagined dishes, zucchini lasagna, cauliflower breadsticks, all so far removed from her mother's cherished recipes. When Adam arrived, the skeptical glint in his eyes matched her own internal doubt. "Mom, why not just go full tilt? Throw everything out the window. This health kick doesn't mean you need to forget your roots," he urged, passionately advocating his modern approach to dining. In that charged atmosphere, Eleanor felt her heart race. How could she explain the emotional anchor these meals provided her family? Would they understand that food was more than just fuel?
He was so engrossed in his own rigid approach that it blinded him to the layers of love baked into those carbs he wanted her to banish. The room filled with an uncomfortable silence, thick with unspokens. What if she didn't stand her ground? What if his rejection chased her legacy away? Tears tinged the edges of her resolve, but determination flared anew. Couldn't health and love coexist? A shaky breath escaped her lips as she pushed back against her son's fervor. Change didn't have to cancel out history. It could weave a new tale altogether. As the evening morphed into an unresolved standoff, Eleanor caught sight of the family photo hanging next to the kitchen window, her cherished tableau of the past. The shadows of doubt enveloped her, whispering fears of what might become of her beloved rituals. Clenching her fork tightly, she remained at the crossroads of transformation, wondering if she could rewrite her family's culinary story before it slipped through her fingers and faded into obscurity. How would she navigate this complex dance of love, legacy, and modernity? And what sacrifices would she need to make to ensure that her family remained close to her heart? Eleanor's finger trembled as it hovered above the glass of sparkling water. She had meticulously watched every spoonful of her carefully planned meal. But standing in the kitchen, a whirlwind of emotions churned within her. Earlier, Adam's passionate defense of his lifestyle echoed in her mind, spurring her into consideration. Perhaps she had been too rigid in her interpreting of both modern health choices and the deep personal values that her recipes held. Was it a possibility, blending old and new without losing either? As she set the table, the room was filled with soft clinks of ceramic and the dull thud of silverware. Each sound echoed like a distant reminder of the family gatherings that once were. Yet tonight's dinner felt hollow, despite the vibrant colors on the plates. What was missing? Love could not be replaced with gluten-free pasta or almond flour bread. Remembering the laughter she and the kids shared over family meals stirred a mixture of sorrow and determination within her. When her daughter Lena entered with the slightest nip of cold air, Eleanor caught a glimpse of hope. Lena had always been receptive to those moments of nostalgia, rooted in stories whispered over dinner. "Mom, what's this?" she asked, gesturing towards the eclectic spread. "Looks interesting." An attempt to lighten the mood spiraled into an uncharted territory. "It's the healthier version of what we used to have," Eleanor said, her voice wavering. The silence that followed was deafening, amplifying the anxiety pooling in her stomach. Would her daughter appreciate the effort, or would she too side with Adam's health fundamentalism? "Interesting," Lena mused, her brow arching slightly. "You know, I loved your lasagna, but if you're doing this for you, then I support it."
Eleanor Barim Sundin would instruct her with a soul that defied care. Her words were a balm and a razor at once, acknowledging the transition Eleanor sought without fully understanding the weight it carried. This moment, a small shift in openness, planted a seed of resolve in Eleanor's heart. She turned away from the table and focused on the spices lining her countertop. Maybe she could find a way to bridge both worlds, merging her treasured traditions with healthier alternatives. After all, didn't memories also involve transformation? Each recipe, each dish was not set in stone. They had evolved, adapted, and breathed into life during each joyful reunion. But the ferocity of Adam's disbelief still loomed. The flicker of an idea struck her. What if she invited her family into this transition with her, rather than trying to navigate it alone? She realized that food was indeed a canvas, and like any artist, she could paint with the colors of both nostalgia and health. Why not host a family cooking night where they could all experiment together? "Lena," Eleanor said suddenly, excitement bubbling in her voice, "how about we team up? Let's have a family recipe night, transform our old favorites together." There was no mistaking the eagerness brewed in her eyes as they connected, a yearning not only for food, but for family cohesion. "Mom, that sounds amazing. I'd love to help bring your recipes back to life," Lena replied, her smile infectious. A flare of hope ignited in Eleanor's chest, swelling outwards, threading its way through the weight of uncertainty.
Yet, even as hope blossomed, Eleanor was acutely aware of the challenge ahead. Would Adam be willing to embrace the change, or would he stand obstinately against the mixture of nostalgia and innovation? Eleanor understood that this cooking night would not just be an exploration of culinary skills. It would be a confrontation of ideologies worth testing. As the vibrant tones of laughter and willingness to collaborate filled her kitchen, Eleanor realized she stood on the brink of something profound. Not just a recipe, but a reconnection to her family's heart. Little did she know, the storm within Adam was only beginning to brew. As she glanced at the spreads resting upon the table, Eleanor knew this was merely the first step. What if this cooking night not only transformed their meals, but challenged the very fabric of their family dynamics? The path ahead would be fraught with revelations and resistance. Would she find herself fighting for the legacy she held dear, or come to terms with new traditions? With her heart racing and the flames of excitement igniting her spirit, she found herself asking yet another crucial question. How far would they go to bridge the gap between health and heritage? Eleanor barely slept that night, her mind swirling with possibilities and the weight of the impending family cooking night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying memories of laughter, joy, and the unmistakable chaos of cooking together.
Yet, as the dishes came together, Eleanor sensed an underlying tension still simmering. This blend of excitement for collaboration, yet an unspoken debate. Would the outcome of their culinary endeavor bridge the gulf of their differing ideologies? As they set the table together, Eleanor's gaze caught Adam's once more, lingering on his choices. She understood this night held more than just taste. It was a search for identity within their family. With every passing moment, she questioned how far she would push her vision, and what it meant if he stood steadfastly against adequately embracing change. "Dinner will be ready soon," she announced, masking her nervousness with a smile, as Lena lit up, eager for the reveal. Yet beneath the surface, Eleanor grappled with the reality. Would their challenge to the culinary tradition be met with openness or with resistance? The weight of anticipation thickened the air, a moment away from the outcomes she had no control over. And the strongest question of all began to resurface in her mind. What if tonight's experiment expanded beyond flavors? What if the clash of values held more than culinary significance? As she prepared the final touches to their meal, Eleanor realized they were on the verge of something transformative. Would their legacy be redefined tonight, or would they retreat once more into the comforts of predictability? Each minute that passed tightened the suspense, the answer lingering just out of reach. As the aroma of baked zucchini lasagna wafted through the kitchen, Eleanor placed the final dish on the table. Her heart raced, a blend of anticipation and nerves coursing through her, as she summoned her family to gather around. They settled into their seats, a mosaic of expressions ranging from curiosity to hunger, but the air was thick with an invisible tension simmering just below the surface. "Okay, everyone," Eleanor declared, attempting to project confidence. "Tonight, we're trying something a bit different. This lasagna is a combination of Grandpa's recipe blended with some healthier choices." She watched Adam's face closely as she spoke, searching for the flicker of approval or dissent that could dictate the tone of the evening. Lena, oblivious to the charged atmosphere, immediately scooped a generous portion onto her plate, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "It looks amazing, Mom!" she exclaimed,
her enthusiasm momentarily bridging the gap of uncertainty looming over them. Eleanor turned to Adam, who had hesitated, his fork poised above his plate, considering. She felt the weight of his scrutiny. "You might like it," she encouraged, trying to mask the tremor in her voice. "Just give it a chance." As each family member took their first bite, Eleanor watched with bated breath. Momentary silence consumed the table, the kind that felt both promising yet perilous. Adam chewed slowly, furrowing his brow as if deciphering an unfamiliar flavor.
At that moment, Eleanor's heart sank. She dreaded hearing the words that would unravel the fragile hope she had woven throughout the day. "What's this sauce?" he finally asked, his tone neither harsh nor kind, a neutral ground that sent Eleanor's inner monologue into overdrive. What if he didn't like it? What if this was the moment he decided her efforts to evolve their family traditions were futile? Unease tendrils wound through her as she braced for criticism. "It's a light marinara," she responded, a calculated carefulness creeping into her words. "I used fresh tomatoes and herbs, and, well, less sugar than Grandma's version. I thought we could all benefit from something lighter." Adam nodded, but his expression remained inscrutable. He continued to chew, seeming to balance thought and flavor in his mind. Finally, he swallowed and pushed his plate slightly away. "It's a change," he said finally, the edge of his voice holding back more than just critique. Eleanor felt a mix of pride and apprehension, a reaction uncoiling in her gut. This was more than culinary. "Change often requires a bit of adjustment," she murmured, more to herself than to her family. She realized she was questioning not just Adam's perception, but her own resolve to push for transformation. Was she genuinely ready to embrace not only a new recipe, but the prospect of shifting family dynamics? "Why did you feel we needed a change?" Adam asked, pointedly, his curiosity blending with skepticism. Eleanor took a deep breath, meeting his gaze. "Because I want us to come together, not just as a family that shares meals, but as a family that shares ideas, new values, healthy habits. We can honor tradition while still growing." The room fell silent again, the weight of her declaration hanging in the air. Lena, sensing the tension, broke the silence. "I think it's cool. It's like a cooking adventure." Her bright, innocent perspective threw a glimmer of hope into the heaviness, but Eleanor remained hyper-aware of Adam's stillness. "Adventures can be risky," he replied, reflective but firm. "What if we end up losing what made us us?" Every syllable beheld a challenge. Eleanor grappled with the notion that this discussion was not just about food anymore. It was a direct confrontation of their family's future legacy. Eleanor felt her resolve strengthening amid the discomfort. If they were to forge a new identity together, it was essential to dismantle the shackles of what had been. "Sometimes we have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. Isn't that worth it?" She saw the glimmer of challenge in Adam's eyes, a flicker of intrigue that suggested he might not completely dismiss her ideas. Yet, despite her hopeful determination, a storm of self-doubt brewed within her. What if she embracing this shift would prompt more resistance than acceptance? The reality that change demanded confrontation churned in her mind, nightmarish and exhilarating. As dinner dwindled, Eleanor caught sight of Adam, still contemplative, the debate far from resolved. The legacy of their family's culinary roots hung precariously in the balance.
Would she find the courage to maintain this pursuit for transformation, or would the weight of tradition anchor them back into complacency? As the last plate cleared, Eleanor could not shake the feeling that they were on the cusp of revelation. Would the next meal be a step toward reconnection or a return to stagnation? More questions loomed, demanding attention and pressing her to confront not just the flavors at play, but the very essence of their shared identity. What she didn't yet know was that Adam's forthcoming response would spark a journey deeper than mere culinary experimentation. The silence at the table lingered like an unfinished conversation, hanging in the air and overwhelming Eleanor. She couldn't shake the feeling that every bite taken by her family was more than just a taste. Each one was a verdict that could change everything. Adam's expression remained inscrutable as he settled into a silence that spread like an unwelcome fog around them. In an effort to redirect the moment's heaviness, Eleanor filled the silence with chatter. "So, Lena, what is your next big adventure at school?" The question slipped from her lips, a lifeline thrown into an ocean of discomfort. But what he didn't know about himself, Eleanor thought, casting her gaze toward Adam once more. Beneath the cool exterior, she sensed a whirlpool of emotions brimming just below the surface. She had to remind herself this was not just about dinner. This was about family, about core beliefs that had been handed down from one generation to the next. "Next week is the science fair," Lena said, her face lighting up with enthusiasm. "I'm doing my project on—" Eleanor's mind drifted as her daughter spoke. Each word sounded like a reminder of what she was aiming to nurture, a sense of exploration, courage to stray from convention. Yet, as the conversation shifted around her, she couldn't help but feel like an intruder in her own home. A gnawing anxiety twisted in her chest. Could she truly reshape their culinary traditions and, along with them, their familial bonds? "That's great, Lena," Adam finally interjected, his voice steady but laced with an underlying current of doubt. "But I have to ask, are we just going to replace Grandma's recipes with all this new stuff? What if we lose the feelings tied to those meals?" Eleanor's heart quickened. His question echoed the fears that had been swirling in her mind. It was a direct confrontation, his choice of words heralding a challenge I had hoped to navigate with more ease. "We won't lose them," I replied tightly, gathering her resolve. "We can keep them alive while also adapting. Isn't that how anything evolves?" The soft hum of morning light filtered through the kitchen window as Eleanor stood before her array of vibrant ingredients, an uncharted battlefield. Today was not merely about cooking breakfast, it represented her commitment to weaving change into the very fabric of her family life. She could almost hear the echoes of yesterday's dinner clash in her mind, each self-doubt a mocking reminder of the obstacles that lay ahead. As she chopped vegetables, crimson bell peppers, crisp spinach, and sharp onions, she considered the distinct impact this breakfast would have on her family. Would they embrace the alternatives, or would the table fall silent under the weight of their resistance? The thought snagged at her like a burr on a road trip. Transforming their meals was becoming synonymous with charting the course of their family legacy, and that felt monumentally heavy. Before even starting the stove, Eleanor marinated in her own reflections. More than just reconsidering her family's culinary traditions, she realized she was reconciling her vision of what it meant not just a mother, but a pioneer, a woman who defied expectations to carve out something new, yet meaningful. The underlying question tugged at her mind. Could she inspire enthusiasm for change without alienating those she loved? Deciding on an omelet infused with bold flavors rather than relying on the same heavy dishes from the past, she felt a rush of creativity mixed with nerves. As she whisked the eggs, a metaphorical clarity struck. Eggs were inherently versatile. The more she added, the more defined her concoction would become. Isn't that the essence of family, she thought? To combine our varied tastes and preferences into one nourishing entity. As she cooked, the aroma began to gather in the air, swirling like invisible threads, beckoning her family to the kitchen. Just then, Lena wandered in, sleep still draped over her eyelids. "What's that, Mom?" Her voice was soft, hopeful, igniting a flicker of inspiration within Eleanor. "Breakfast is almost ready," Eleanor replied, taking a moment to gauge her daughter's expression, searching for curiosity or maybe a hint of displeasure. Lena sniffed again, this time more alert, a smile breaking through the remnants of slumber. "Is it something new?" Encouraged, Eleanor nodded. "We're experimenting with flavors today. How about helping me taste test?" The invitation propelled Lena into action, her enthusiasm bubbling over as she climbed onto a stool beside Eleanor. For a fleeting moment, Eleanor felt a fragile truce, as if both of them were engaged in something far more meaningful than breakfast, a collaboration rooted in shared discovery. But, as if on cue, Adam stepped into the kitchen, expectation etched on his face. The moment he recognized the unfamiliar ingredients scattered across the countertop, his nonchalance melted away. "What are we having, and are they vegetables?" Eleanor felt her heart rate pick up.
Skepticism dripped from Adam's question, as she sensed the familiar tension rising again. "Just trying something different," she replied, trying not to sound defensive. "You might even like it." His brow furrowed slightly. "You mean it's not a full-on Christmas breakfast?" The challenge in his voice was unmistakable, a jarring reminder of their ongoing battle. Swallowing back her frustration, Eleanor replied firmly, "No, it's not. It's about evolving, allowing our meals to tell stories rather than simply being defined by nostalgia." Lena watched the exchange with wide eyes, her curiosity piqued. Eleanor took a deep breath, determined not to waver. "Will you help me be an active part of this evolution?" she asked Adam, her voice steady despite the maelstrom of emotions at play. The room fell silent, the air charged with unspoken thoughts, and Eleanor realized this wasn't merely about breakfast. This was about building a family culture where conversations were embraced rather than shied away from. What if breakfast could spark something greater, a bridge between resistance and acceptance? Yet, as the omelet sizzled, Eleanor felt the stakes rising. In this moment, could breakfast truly serve as the catalyst for a deeper dialogue? And how deep would her own conviction need to run to cross that fragile bridge without faltering? The challenge loomed over her. Would they stand together or drift further apart? The resolution hung in the air like steam rising from the skillet, waiting for someone to break through the dense fog of indecision. The fork awaited its purpose.
How much could a simple meal unlock in her family's hearts? Would today mark a significant stride forward, or an affliction of how far they still had to go? Eleanor stood frozen for a heartbeat, the aroma of the omelet mingling with the tension in the air. Adam's skepticism felt like a wall, a barrier to the change she craved to instill within their home. She glanced at Lena, whose bright eyes reflected hope, reminding Eleanor of the stake this breakfast held not just for her, but for their collective future. The omelet hissed as it reached its final moments of cooking, and Eleanor realized that, just like the dish, her family too needed the right ingredients to thrive. Courage wasn't enough if she didn't offer something palatable, something that blended their preferences into a vibrant dish, instead of a forced confrontation. "Here's a thought," she ventured, turning her body towards Adam, inviting him into the process rather than shutting him out. "Spices?" Adam's voice held a skeptical tremor, but she recognized it as an opening rather than a dismissal. "Absolutely. If you find something you love, we can incorporate it together," Eleanor offered, hoping her enthusiasm would spark even the slightest interest in him.
Este som soava mais do que a realidade. Som com intringuável sede, com uma determinação que notava surpresa a todos. A sua forma de esplendoroso luxúria nunca enfrentou a mais simples contradição. Eleanor, todo cá entrado com a vitrine de seus interesses, como a luz do sol, podia queimar ou questionar os seus verdades. Adam, homem achado em seu descanso, a maior figura familiar, aparecia com uma solene seriedade. Seu rosto descaradamente frio, habituado a uma nova ameaça. O novo indivíduo que se aproximava nunca teria o prazer de enfrentar seu caráter. Sim, a aparência de Adam parecia ser mais do que uma boa palavra. A influência da nova recém-chegada parecia estar observada com grande atenção. Eleanor tentava cuidar de qualquer falhamento dela, cuidando da transição da equilíbrio entre os familiares.
The forks clinked against the plates, a bridge between familiar and foreign, yet the tantalizing question loomed. Could Eleanor navigate the impending dinner without reverting to the comforting but stifling patterns of the past? Eleanor took a steadying breath, her phone still buzzing ominously in front of her. The family dinner loomed like a shadow, reminiscent of the rigid expectations she felt suffocatingly pressing down on her. She blinked as Adam's voice cut through her thoughts. "It's good, Mom. Not bad for a first try," he said, his tone surprisingly approving. Emboldened by his comment, she pushed herself to cast aside her anxiety. "Thank you, Adam. It feels good to hear that. We can improve, with your input, of course." Each word seemed to stitch together a new reality, one threaded with optimism rather than defeat. But as the conversation meandered through lighter topics, Eleanor couldn't shake her sister's warning echoing in her mind. They would expect the old behaviors at the dinner table, the familiar roles, her as the peacekeeper, Adam as the indifferent spouse, Lena as the happy child trying to bridge the silence. The mere thought of it felt oppressive. In an attempt to harness this tension, Eleanor suggested they play a game. "What if we brainstorm some family goals we want to achieve together?" she prompted, hoping to tap into the energy they had just conjured. Lena's face lit up. "Like what? I want to go camping." "Camping sounds like fun," Adam agreed, his quick concessions surprising Eleanor. We could use the time away. Eleanor's mind raced, plotting ways to maintain this new openness and connection. What if we start with one goal a month, and we can keep track of it? They'll be small things, just enough to challenge us, and we can cook different recipes from the places we choose to camp. For a moment, the weight of familial challenge lifted, and Eleanor saw glimmers of possibility in Adam. Lena squealed with delight, throwing out places and types of cuisine. And Adam began to list some camping snacks he used to enjoy as a boy, his passion seeping through the hesitant exterior. Yet, even as laughter punctuated the air, that uneasy feeling thrummed beneath the surface. How would their new dynamic withstand the scrutiny of Eleanor's sister, not to mention the pressures of the family's history? The noise faded around her as Eleanor spiraled internally. She momentarily lost sight of her present, projecting herself into the future, picturing that dinner, replaying old conversations in her head where she always felt disregarded. Memories of being the outcast during family gatherings hovered like an ominous cloud. "Mom?" Lena's small voice brought her back, piercing through the maze of her thoughts. "Are you excited about dinner?" Eleanor forced a smile, wanting to reassure her daughter. "Of course I am. Why wouldn't I be?"
But the question made her stomach twist. Excitement felt foreign when she was surrounded by so much uncertainty. Adam, sensing her hesitance, looked at her with a soft, questioning demeanor. "This is all new for us, Eleanor. Even if they don't see it, we can just be us." His words felt like armor, a protective barrier against the inevitable judgments. Maybe this new version of their family could indeed stand tall against the weight of the past, free from the constraints binding her. But would that armor withstand the pressure from outside forces? Would she have the courage when her sister's formidable opinions came crashing in? The familiar weight returned. Eleanor resolved to prepare herself, mentally lining up her responses, her newfound identity ready for scrutiny. "Okay, let's tackle this together." She took a deep breath, excitement blending into adrenaline. "It'll be an adventure, just like our new camping goals." As she forced a smile, a new plan blossomed, igniting her determination. She would not waver. But then doubt clawed at her mind as she remembered the text, the painful rift it represented. The moment of truth was approaching fast, and she needed to face it unflinchingly. But deep down, Eleanor grappled with the fear of losing herself in their family narrative again, questioning if she could truly hold on to her newfound autonomy. The transition from hopefulness to dread echoed within her as she imagined walking into that dinner where every word and interaction could either reinforce the old paradigm or break these chains. With a chill gripping her heart, she knew the real battle was just beginning. Would she forge her path, or would she return to the comfort of familiarity? The question hung heavily, leading her deeper into her thoughts. In that uncertainty, she sensed the inevitable. She would have to confront not just her family, but her very self, her inhabitant in both worlds. The time has come to face what she feared most, the judgment and disappointment that had haunted her life. Could she emerge unscathed from the essential confrontation waiting ahead? Eleanor's heart hammered as she adjusted the collar of her blouse in the mirror.
The simple act felt monumental, a symbol of her attempt to present a new version of herself, a woman who could no longer be the quiet observer at family gatherings. Today, she would no longer be swept into the current of expectations without resistance. The pungent scent of garlic and onions simmering in the kitchen reminded her of the warmth of family dinners in the past, which starkly contrasted with the tension that now enveloped her. As she entered the living room, she noticed Adam patiently explaining board game rules to Lena. Their laughter lightened the atmosphere, but each chuckle felt like a fragile layer over Eleanor's anxiety. This was the moment she had envisioned, yet an undercurrent of doubt began to swell. Could they maintain this connection under scrutiny?
What? They maintain this connection under scrutiny?